This morning, I want to just say, if you don't know, I'm coming off of 2 weeks of vacation, which ended yesterday at 4 p.m. when we pulled back into Salt Lake City. And so this morning is not going to be a traditional message because I don't believe I'm supposed to work on vacation. And so beginning Saturday, yesterday afternoon, I had a little bit of time to put together a message for today. I went on vacation with a few prayers, though. One of my prayers was, God, would you refresh our spirit? You guys have probably been there before, but sometimes you just get tired. And we just needed God to refresh our spirits. I asked God to give us some memories as a family, and that was really special. I asked God to speak to me, and I asked God, can you give me some clarity and some vision for the front church as we move towards our grand opening? And so what I offer you this morning as a message instead is 10 life-changing, epic, monumental, world-shattering reflections from my vacation. 10. Number 1, I will take a vacation as the pastor of the front church. There are some pastors who can get caught in a trap of thinking of working for the idol of ministry success, and they'll sacrifice anything on the idol to the idol of ministry success. They'll sacrifice their family, they'll sacrifice their time, they'll sacrifice their kids, all to have a successful ministry, and that will not be me. And so sometimes I'm going to break for my family and for you guys. I can't pastor you well if I'm not shepherding and caring for my own family well. And so that's my first reflection. I'm going to take a vacation because it's too important for my family and it's too important for you guys that I rest well. Number 2, we need to pray. This began to happen in my mind before vacation, but just kind of some scenarios, some things were pointing my mind in that direction, and then some encounters I had with some people just point me to our absolute need to pray. Because we can't do this alone. Like, we can't start the front church alone. We can't have a killer kids ministry alone. We can't fill this room alone. We can't get our friends and our family and our classmates and our coworkers and our neighbors to church alone. We can invite them, but God's got to work. The verse that keeps returning to me is Psalm 127:1. Unless the Lord builds the house, its builders labor in vain. We can't do it without his help. And so we have got to pray. And the other thing that has just occurred to me, and this might be an uncomfortable thought, but I think it's a biblical thought. And that is that the Bible teaches that there is a barrier between us and God, and that barrier is sin. And think of it as a sound barrier. It is a sound barrier. And those who place faith and trust in Jesus and turn towards Jesus, God removes that barrier. He's removed it on the cross. And God hears the prayers of his people. Not because we earned it, not because we're so great and awesome. No, because we admit we needed him to die on the cross for us. We admit our sin. We admit our brokenness. And he removes that barrier, and God hears the prayers of his people. But Scripture doesn't teach us that God hears the prayers of those who aren't his people. He is able to. This is a mystery I'm going to leave up to God. Well, what does this mean? This means that we as his people, if the sound barrier is moved for us because we're trusting in Jesus and God moves the sin barrier, which is a sound barrier, away, it means we have a special high and holy calling to approach God on behalf of our friends, our family, our neighbors, our coworkers, our classmates, to approach him because he hears us. He hears those of us who trust in Jesus. So we're going to pray for a few things. We need to pray. We're praying for 100 kids at our Jesus Adventure Kids Camp. We're praying for a full house September 12th. We're praying, why? So people meet Jesus. We want people to meet Jesus. We want to be a church where our neighbors come and then they think, I should have invited my neighbor to come. And then their neighbors come. And then those neighbors think, I should invite my neighbors to come. And those neighbors come. But we can't do this alone. That's number 2. We need to pray. Number 3, Phone notifications interrupt my prayer life. That's my third world-shattering, epic, monumental, life-changing reflection from vacation. I made the mistake of not turning my notifications off for week 1 of vacation. And every time that little thing buzzes, even if it's silenced, whatever is going on up here starts thinking about what's going on in my pocket. And I turned my notifications off. And the Lord kept bringing this verse to my mind, and this is Romans 8:6, which says that the mind governed by the flesh leads to death, but the mind governed by the Spirit leads to life and peace. And because I turned my notifications off, because I created room for silence, in those quiet moments when my phone wasn't buzzing and when I wasn't reaching for it, the Lord kept bringing this verse. Some of us want Scripture to become more part of our lives, want to saturate ourselves in it, want it to change us. Sometimes we got to create space for it to change us. And I found that as I turned the notifications off, I kept returning to this passage again and again and again. The mind governed by the flesh leads to death, but the mind governed by the Spirit leads to life and peace. And I love that verse too, because it doesn't just mean inner peace. We are so guilty of reading into that verse. We think, the inner peace, inner tranquility. No, peace was like the biblical idea of shalom. A peace was something that worked in us and then out of us. And so the Apostle Paul, when he's writing Romans 8, he's saying that the mind governed by the Spirit leads to life, not just in us, but out of us. Leads to peace, not just in us, but peace around us. Doesn't our world need some more people controlled by and peace bringers and peace givers and peace vessels? Fourth reflection, God is moving even when we don't notice it. This is a picture of Robin and I at Glorieta, New Mexico. Next one. This is where Robin and I first met. But this picture was taken last week because we went to the place where we first met. We met 11 years ago in Glorieta, New Mexico. And you know how when you go to a spot, sometimes the memories just start to trickle back? And we remembered something. I remembered, I wasn't actually supposed to be there that week. It was kind of a weird summer. Something opened up. I end up in New Mexico for this event. You begin to recall these things, and you begin to see how God was working when we didn't know it to just align certain things so that we met. And it was a really beautiful moment for us to, as a family, stand in the place where Robin and I met and thank God for bringing us together there. God is working even when we don't know it. We're not aware of it. Thing 5. There's nothing that touches deep Christian community. It is so good. This is a picture of us and our friends. We stayed in Omaha for a few days with a good friend of mine. And the thing about deep Christian community is it's marked by vulnerability. It's marked by transparency. It's marked by honesty. You don't have to hide. You don't have to pretend. Because the entry requirement to becoming a follower of Jesus is to admit we don't have it all together, to admit we needed Jesus to die on the cross for us. Because that is the entry requirement, then we can just level. And it is so good. It is burden lifting. It is so good to just level with good Christian friends. My 6th world-shattering, life-changing, monumental, epic reflection is there's nothing that touches the refreshment that comes by God's Holy Spirit. After week 1, we turned off the notifications, but I think it's safe to say we were both very tired still. I was tired. I'm like, God, you know I need rest. You know I need rest. And so we went to church on vacation. Here's the thing. I never want my ideal of the good life to be absent of gathering with God's people. I don't ever want to think, oh, that'd be so good to not go to church and just camp all the time or ski all the time or snow or just not go to church and just skip it. And I don't want my vision of an ideal life to be absent of community with God's people. And so we went on vacation, and it was strange. I mean, it's just a non-traditional church, sort of coming out of more, it's kind of evolving. It was once very traditional. Anyway, we're just at this Baptist church that some of my family goes to. But God's Spirit met us. I was weepy the whole time. You know, have you ever been in a room where like the Spirit is just like a knife? And we were just, oh, it's so good. There's nothing that can come close to the refreshment that God's Spirit can give, especially when you're tired and you're worn out. Number 7, kids are awesome. That's my 7th observation of our trip. I wish I could throw that next slide up. I wish I could bottle some of these moments that we had as a family. I never want to forget the look on my kids' faces. Friday night, last night of vacation, there happens to be a carnival in Cortez, Colorado, where we're staying. So you better believe we're going to the carnival. So we go to the carnival, and my kids are just smiling ear to ear, running around. I'm like, man, can I just bottle this moment? Kids are awesome. But my other part of that reflection is we also had our most epic meltdown we've ever had as a family while on vacation in Santa Fe, New Mexico a few days ago. The people inside the store probably thought that we did not know how to discipline or care for our kids because our kids went bonkers. And I don't mean like the good kind. We're zone defense. We have 3 kids now. We're not man on man anymore. So we're trying to grab onto both of them, and then one of us is trying to get the other one and carry them out, and the kids are just going wild and they're screaming, and I'm sure the people in the store are like, just give the kids what they want. But no, you missed your chance, kid. And so we tried to stay as cool as we could, but even then, kids can be our teachers, you know it? If we let them. 8th observation, kids are sponges. When we were at church last Sunday, we checked 2 of our kids into the kids ministry stuff, but then Rosie hung with us. Rosie's our littlest. And I'm a singer. I like to sing. I'm singing in worship. I'm feeling a little weepy. And then I noticed she's doing everything I do. I like to tap my arm sometimes to be the music, and then Rosie's tapping her arm. All right, and then she's reaching over and she's tapping my arm. She's doing whatever I do. And this is where I want to just hit the pause button for a second and talk briefly about a theology of kids ministry and why we at the Front Church believe this is so incredibly important. Matthew chapter 19. Verse 13 and 14 says, Then people brought little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and pray for them. But the disciples rebuked them. And Jesus said, Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. Let the little children come to me. Do not hinder them. You see, for the disciples, the children were an annoyance. They were a distraction from the real stuff. We're doing real ministry over here, and these kids, they're getting in the way, so let's just keep them out of the way so we can do the real stuff over here. And others in Jesus' time and culture saw children as not worth that much. And Jesus is clear, though, for kids, we are not to hinder them. So for the Front Church, what this means is that children are not a distraction. Children are the attraction. They're the main thing. Children aren't JV and we're varsity. Children are varsity. Children aren't, they just do kid stuff, but we adults, we do discipleship. We do the real stuff. We disciple one another. We do this grown-up stuff. No, kids are opportunities to disciple. Children are the real thing. If we get the children, we will get the families of our community. If we screw up the children, what are we even doing? Do not hinder them. Jesus speaks a word of rebuke to his disciples because they think kids are a distraction. And we can think that too, can we not? We can think we're the main thing and just treat kids like as a sideshow or something. Just keep them entertained. But Jesus rebukes his disciples, and he'll rebuke us too. And says, don't hinder them. So our kid front protocol, we don't want to hinder kids. We don't want to hinder kids' experience of Jesus. We don't want to hinder kids hearing about Jesus. So we're going to do everything in our power to open the way, to protect kids, to make sure they're safe, to make sure they are priority, so that we're not hindering. I often say, and our kid front leaders say, that background checks don't protect children. We do background check all our kids volunteers, but they just tell you who's already screwed up, right? What really protects children is policies and procedures. It's always two people in a room always two adults in a room at the same time. No exceptions. No one leaves. There's a third person that goes back and forth. It is setting standards in place so that kids are protected, so that our most vulnerable in our community are cherished, loved, taken care of, so that they can experience Jesus' story and hear Jesus' story. We will not hinder them. We will go out of our way to lay out the red carpet for them. They are discipleship opportunities. Some of us grow up and we're like, I want to pour my life into someone. I want to disciple people. I want to give my life away and pour it in. And we don't ever think about kids. Why? Discipleship starts the moment a child is born. And if you disciple children, which leads to the discipleship of parents, which leads to the discipleship of families, which leads to the transformation of our community. And so this is why it's so important. Kid Front is the most important ministry of the Front Church, because the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. And we think, sometimes when we are Kid Front volunteers, we think we're teaching them. They're probably teaching us. You know, you might hear a sermon louder as a Kid Front volunteer watching kids than you do over here, if you're open to God speaking to you in that way. So not only are we told by Jesus not to hinder the kids, we realize if we hinder them, we're going to hinder ourselves, because they can be our teachers. So as we're almost back to my life-changing points here, some of you should sign up as Kid Front volunteers, and you should do that using your Connect card and just say, I'm interested in being a Kid Front volunteer. You can put that Connect card in the welcome box over there, and we will definitely be reaching out to you. But we also need more Kid Front volunteers than we have people. So some of you need to think, who's really good with kids? Who do I trust with my kids? Who might be someone who lives around me who would be good at a good Kid Front volunteer? Who do you need to invite? Who do we at the Front Church need to meet so that our Kid Front experience is the best it can be? And not everyone can Kid Front volunteer, that's fine. But recognize that everything we do, even our setup team, is laying the stage, setting the stage for our Kid Front ministry. You can set up a great classroom even if you don't feel that great about volunteering with kids. You can help set that thing up. You can be an incredible welcomer to parents who brought their kids here, even if you're not that great. There's a million ways that you can love kids, even if you have difficulty with kids. That make sense? We are going to be a church for kids, but we're also going to be a church that equips families for their kids, because kids watch us. And they're watching us at home. So we're going to equip families so that at home, kids can hear the story of Jesus too. So, unpause. Kids are sponges. This is why it's so important for our kids to be rooted in God's love and in Jesus' story. Number 9, we've got to slow down to hear the voice of God. That's my 9th observation from vacation. Maybe you can't take a 2-week vacation like I can, but I think you can find ways to pause. I think you can turn off your notifications. I think you could go on a hike and turn your phone on airplane mode. I like having a phone on a hike. If something goes wrong, I want to be able to call someone. But you don't have to check Facebook on your hike. You don't have to check emails or messages on your hike. So maybe go on a hike and turn on airplane mode. Maybe it's, now be careful with this one, it's super dry right now. But maybe it's a fire pit. Why is the fire pit like so magical? Right? You get friends around a fire pit and then you just start talking. I'm like, what did this fire do? But it does something. I don't know. Maybe that's how you can take a break. Maybe it's a day of no social media. Maybe it's just a day where your mantra is, look at my kids, not my phone. I don't know. We've got to slow down to hear the voice of God. And the 10th reflection I have from vacation. This one is world-shattering, life-changing, monumentally epic. We have the best message in the world. Oh man. And we want people to know it. 2021 is our launch year. Post-launch, once we do our grand opening, September 12th, then we're going to start doing baptisms because the church baptizes people. Then we're going to start doing communion because the church takes communion together. Then we're going to start doing community building events, post bigger services. In January of next year, we're going to roll out community groups. All these things are coming as we begin to learn how to live as a church post grand opening. And I'm so excited to see what Jesus always does, is he always enters people's lives and changes them. He's always doing it. And on vacation, I'm listening to my songs in alphabetical order in iTunes. Check it out. I made it from L to O. Yeah, that's a lot of songs. We drove for 3,000 miles, and I made it from L to O. But somewhere in the end, I hear a song on my phone. That's an old Stephen Curtis Chapman song, and most of you probably have no idea who that even is. But it's a song called No Greater Love. And Stephen Curtis Chapman wrote that song because he was remembering the story of 5 missionaries who decades ago had it on their heart to reach a people with the message of Jesus who never heard it before. And these people that never heard it before were notoriously violent. Some tribes people. And they knew that these people needed the message of Jesus. So they plan, they strategize. They finally fly a private plane into this secluded area. And they make contact with the people. The people meet them on the beach, and they seem to have a good exchange. They exchange some gifts. They give the people some stuff. And the next day, the tribes people come back, and they kill all 5 missionaries. Boom. And the missionaries knew this was a risk. And I'm thinking, what motivates someone to be like, I'm going to do it? The message of Jesus is so important, so life-changing, so life-giving. It means so much that I'm going to risk all for these folks to hear the message of Jesus. What can motivate that? And then the answer is simply, Jesus' love. But you know what Jesus' love does? That story gets so good. Those tribes people that killed the missionaries, their families, of the missionaries, they didn't give up. They ended up going back to the tribes people. The tribes people end up surrendering their lives to Jesus. One of the tribal leaders who was responsible for the death of the missionaries ends up baptizing one of the missionaries' sons. Oh, we have the greatest message in the world. We have a message. Like, what kind of world is Jesus birthing? That world. A world where enemies are loved as neighbors and where enemies become neighbors. A world that can be so rooted in the love of God that death doesn't even hold power over us. The church is the force of the greatest good in our entire world. There's no force of greater good than this. because death has no power over us when we realize how anchored, how that God's love's never going to let us go. I want that. I want it. And that's what we have to offer. We get to offer the world Jesus. Nothing else can touch the refreshment of his Spirit. Nothing else can touch the community of his people. And rooted in the love of God, anchored in Jesus' story, we get to invite as many people as possible to encounter this Jesus and have their lives turned upside down and be a part of the new world that he is bringing to birth, right in the middle of our old world that's fallen apart. Those are my 10 reflections from vacation. We have an open house in 2 weeks. Let's invite a whole bunch of people to see what this is going to look like. Why? Because we want them to meet Jesus. We have our Jesus Adventure Kids Camp coming up next month. Let's invite a whole lot of kids to come. Why? So that the kids and their parents will meet Jesus. We have our grand opening 3 months from now. Let's invite people to come so that they hear the message of Jesus, and so that in a world where you feel like you're tossed and thrown about by the latest fear, by the latest urgent news, by the latest thing vying for your attention, by the latest thing looking like it's going to destroy all the rest of us, or whatever it is, whatever fear holds people captive, whatever thing, anxiety they just can't seem to let go, let's invite them here so that they can meet Jesus and experience the freedom that only comes from him. I can't wait. Let's pray.